Good evening and welcome to the fifth lecture of the 2025 spring season of the Frankfort Heritage Lecture Series and our 19th lecture in total. Thank you all for coming. My name is John Carlton and I'm the organizer of the Frankfort Heritage Week Coalition and the co-organizer of this lecture series. As always, I want to give a big thanks to Paul Sawyer Public Library for hosting us and to my co-organizer, Adult Services Librarian Diane Dehoney, for everything she and her staff do for these lectures and the community. And many thanks to the Frankfort Plant Board and Cable 10 for taping these lectures and hosting them on their YouTube channel, and to the State Journal and for always giving us some great additional publicity. I'd like to remind everyone that you can find flyers with the full 2025 spring season of the lecture series printed in the back, and you can find the schedule on the library's website and videos of past lectures on Cable 10's YouTube channel. If you're not already but want to keep up with the lecture series, be sure to follow the library's Facebook page. We've been extremely fortunate this season with the caliber of speakers we've had present for this lecture series. From Stuart Sanders, Director of Research and Publications at the Kentucky Historical Society, and Dr. Patrick Lewis, the newly installed President CEO of the Filson Historical Society, to Dr. Doug Boyd, Director of the Louis B. Nunn Center for Oral History at the UK Libraries, who honed his oral histories work right here in Frankfort. And also Nicky Hughes, who helped start the Kentucky Military History Museum, served as the first curator of historic sites for the city of Frankfort, and later the first curator of the Capital City Museum. Though starting out with and continuing much of his history career with Nicky Hughes, our speaker today has inarguably become the face of Frankfort and Franklin County history over his more than 2 decades of public service to our community, and his more than 3 decades of work as the voice of Frankfort radio. Many of us remember that unforgettable voice every morning at 6 a.m. on Frankfort's WFKY radio station, wishing us a happy birthday every year and at every stage of our lives. Delving into the unknown histories of musical acts or genres, telling stories or sharing the local news, or giving us brief glimpses of Kentucky and Frankfort history. Then, taking up the mantle of Frank Sauer, providing historic Frankfort walking tours downtown at Frankfort Cemetery, Fort Hill, and Cove Spring, often adorned in his memorable post-Revolutionary War costume. Defying all expectations by walking backwards continuously for often an hour or two up and down and across the streets of Frankfort. Those of us who've grown up with Cable 10 remember constant replays of those walking tours, as well as replays of John Gray's historic Frankfort lecture series that most often took place in the basement of Farmers Bank, where much of the work was laid for the establishment of the addition of historic sites to Frankfort's Parks and Recreation Department, and eventually the start of the Capital City Museum. Often with his partners in crime, Nicky Hughes, Gene Birch, Richard Taylor, and other members of Frankfort Heritage Press, Mr. Hatter has authored, compiled, collaborated, or edited the following iconic and important books on Frankfort and Franklin County history: A Walking Tour of Historic Frankfort, Historic Images of Frankfort, Volumes 1 and 2, Bluegrass Craftsmen, being the reminiscences of Ebenezer Hiram Stedman, papermaker, 1808 to 1885, Historic Frankfort, Yesterday and Today, and Frankfort Cemetery, the Westminster Abbey of Kentucky. And he's contributed research, forwards, introductions, and editing to many more. I know I'm but one of a multitude of sincere members of our Frankfort and Franklin County community who are appreciative of, indebted to, and inspired by Russ Hatter and his work. Every person that serves their community, particularly those of us involved in local history and preservation, can only hope to contribute a fraction of the work that he has for their community. As my favorite description of Russ goes, and I apologize that I can't remember who said it, but that man has forgotten more about Frankfort history than most of us will ever hope to know. And without further ado, please welcome Adult Services Librarian Diane Dehoney to introduce today's speaker.
Thank you so much, John. Thank you all for coming out tonight. What a wonderful turnout. I appreciate you all being here in support of Russ and the Capital City Museum on this new book that That being said, the Capital City Museum is set up in the back of the room. Ellie's waving at everybody back there. We're glad to have their wonderful staff with us tonight to sell copies of Russ Hatter's Franklin County Reference at the conclusion of our program tonight. So if you want to pick one of those up, great time to do it and get it signed by the man himself. So it is my great honor to welcome my friend Russ Hatter to the podium tonight. He is a native of Cincinnati, Ohio, and attended Kentucky Christian College and Kentucky State College. He began his 40-year career in broadcasting in 1961 at WGOH in Grayson, Kentucky. He moved to Frankfort in 1965, where he was a morning announcer for WFKY. In 2001, he left radio to pursue a new career as assistant curator of historic sites for the City of Frankfort's Department of Parks and Recreation. Where he participated, along with Nicky Hughes, in the establishment of the Capital City Museum. After retiring in 2013, Hatter returned shortly afterward as the newly created city historian at the Capital City Museum, where he again retired in 2021 after 20 years of service. Throughout his time in Frankfort, Hatter has appeared in or directed numerous theatrical productions, acted in 3 local movies, and can still be seen occasionally on Frankfort Plant Board's Cable 10 with his popular walking tours. He has written and researched numerous books related to the incredible history of Frankfort and Franklin County through Frankfort Heritage Press. In 2024, Hatter was awarded the Dr. James C. Clotter Lifetime Dedication to Kentucky History Award by the Kentucky Historical Society. And he resides right down here in South Frankfort with his wife Karen and their dog McKay. So please help me to welcome to the podium tonight, Russ Hatter.
Thank you, John and Diane, and all of you for showing up tonight. The NCAA tournament starts at about 6:30, so you must not care about sports or basketball. Well, I'm recording it, so I'll get to see it later. This book is about Franklin County, and it's called the Franklin County Reference. Now, I originally called it Russ Hatter's Notes on Franklin County, because what I did was go through every folder and file in the Capital City Museum research area and just lifted out information. And they just said it needed to be dressed up a little better. So we're calling it the Franklin County Reference. Now, this is based on the writings that were in the folder. So I don't know if everything in those folders was the exact truth. So if you find something in here along the way that, oh no, couldn't have been, no way, let us know at the museum. Don't come to me, go to the museum, and then they'll get in touch with me. But I do want to thank Dr. Eleanor Haskin-Wagner. She has come to the Capital City Museum and continued our goal and our ideas, and she has just been marvelous. Thank you, Ellie, so much. I also want to thank my old partner in crime, Gene Birch. Without Gene, you wouldn't be able to see any pictures. You wouldn't see the beautiful pages that he and Bob Lanham and some of the others have come up with throughout those 12, 13 books that we've all put together. And then there's, you deserve that, Gene. He didn't make a dime off of this book. Sorry, Gene. I do want to thank one more person, and that's my faithful companion, the woman who drove every road in Franklin County while I took pictures and jotted down notes, and the woman who has been a part of every other book that my name is associated with, and that, of course, is my wife, Karen. She's here today. But we've already used up 14 minutes of our program. And I've got way too much to tell you. In fact, I scripted this because I knew that if I went down those wormholes and rabbit holes and everything else, you'd never get out of here, or you would just leave on your own. But this is not a completely developed history of Franklin County at all. It's been compiled, like I said, from the files of the museum, and we can't verify what everybody else has written. You know, Al Alfaro put together that bicentennial book, you know, and then collected family histories. So what we found in that book specifically is gone into our files as well. So I'm counting on the families knowing what their families should be, but I've also found out that some families like to embellish. Some people like to add. In fact, there's some really freaky stories. Are you familiar with a guy by the name of, well, I shouldn't tell it. You buy the book, you'll read it, you'll see it. In 2023, I began a project for Franklin County Fiscal Court on what information the Capital City Museum had concerning Franklin County outside of city limits. This reference shares data recognizing people, places, and historical events. Much of the material was derived from a timeline that I created. When I first started working with Nicky and started studying books about Frankfort, Franklin County, I thought, oh, I need to jot this down. So I created a timeline from over 300 publications that gives us a picture of the development of Frankfort, Franklin County from 1750 all the way up to the present. It's a big, long timeline, I'll tell you that. Part of the project was to travel every county road outside the city limits of Franklin County. Robert Hewitt, then Director of Franklin County Planning, Zoning, and Building Code Enforcement, provided an enlarged map of the county broken into 8 larger quadrants. And I've got my material here. I can show you the map. So what Karen and I and our little dog McKay did was we traveled all these different quadrants, but not numerically in order, like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. We might have done 6, and then we would do 3, and so it's a little jogged in our writing and everything, but it covers the information. So the only roads we didn't go on were those that said no trespassing. Our photos tonight represent about half of what is in the book. The book contains around 85 pictures. So you'll get a good sample tonight of about half of those pictures. This is representative of some of the beauty of Franklin County. This is up at McDonald's Ferry. Back in the day, in the early 1790s, 1780s, 1800s, you had to cross the river in order to get into Frankfort. So there was a lot of ferries all over the place. Benson Creek had ferries on it, and then, of course, they built bridges later. But this is out at Paul's Grove's Landing. in the northern part of Franklin County. And Paulsgrove's Landing was named for the family of George Paulsgrove, who settled on Flat Creek in 1821. The family spelling was originally spelled Paltzgraff, Paulsgrove, German. This next picture is Bel Air. It still stands on not Reading Road, but right off Georgetown Road. This was the home of Reverend it's a hard one to say, Cadwallader Lewis. He was a farmer and a Baptist preacher who assisted in developing Georgetown College. He also preached at Buck Run Baptist Church. They had some problems, difficulties, as churches do. He started the Providence Baptist Church later. This next picture shows the home of Honest Dick Tate. This is where he was born. Honest Dick Tate, for those of you that don't know, was treasurer of Kentucky for about 20 years. And if you needed some money to start a project or something, you could go to Honest Dick Tate and borrow. And of course, you had to pay a little interest back. And over the course of those 20 years, the indebtedness got pretty high, to where some of those that owed the money said, you know, if we got rid of Honest Dick Tate, we wouldn't have to pay our bills. Well, Dick Tate figured that out, and he left. He traveled all over the country. We have some records that Lucian Parker gave to us that showed they had found Honest Dick Tate in Missouri, and if you'll come and get him, we'll hold him. They wouldn't come and get him. No doubt the person that got that information had some money that he owed to the state of Kentucky. Honest Dick Tate, very interesting guy. We knew he made it to China, and that might be where he passed. This is a beautiful house out at Paulsgrove Landing that I don't know anything about. Everybody thinks I know everything, but I don't. But I just love this house. It's just beautiful. I don't know if anybody lives in it, and I'm hoping through the course of the sales of this book, we'll learn more about this one. This represents some of the wonderful architecture work of Rick Hardy. This is located off the old Owenton Road at Black Oak, White Oak, and Pin Oak Drives. This next picture, Judge Michael Mueller and his wife, Andrea. This is their home. You can see how the influence of inside-out design has shown up in this wonderful house. Michael was a former 3rd District magistrate and then later elected judge. He's our current judge, 2022. Michael. This is a beautiful home, and it shows as an example of the beauty of Franklin County. It's out off of the, what road is that? Gregory Woods Road, out in the northwestern part of the county. This is Judge Reuben Brown's house. He lived on Browns Lane out at Bridgeport, Kentucky. The Constitution for 1859 kind of rearranged things. Our judges and our judge officials were originally picked by the governor and by the state. But with the new Constitution, that's when we started electing our own judges. Well, Reuben Brown came about at this time. And this is out on Browns Lane. It just has a warm feeling to me. It looks in pretty bad shape. At least they got the grass cut. This is, let me see if I got the right thing here now. Yeah. This is showing the map again. Uh-oh. We got a problem, Houston. That may be the end of the pictures. I'll just be talking about it. We'll see if Diane can come up with something. The photographs are indicative of our traveling down all the county roads. And I think there's, well, anyway, we'll let her worry about it. The book itself comes up with chapters that contain information. You all just relax with me a minute. These things happen, you know that. That's not Franklin County. We have a chapter on the communities of Franklin County outside the city limits. There's about 50 little burgs that grew up through the development of Franklin County. Bailey's Mill, Bald Knob, Bell Point, Benson, Big Eddy, Bridgeport, Chokeville, Ducker Station, Elmville, Elsinore, Farmdale, Flagfort, Flat Creek. Starting to sound like a Johnny Cash song, isn't it? But there's a lot of communities, and we try to share in that chapter information related to the, there you go. Okay, now we'll get back to our pictures. Thank you, Jean, and thank you, Diane. All right, now let me get myself back on the right page. That's pretty well self-explanatory that you're seeing. Flat Creek Farms Preserve was incorporated in 2018, and at the time of our writing, this was owned by Vic Gasparini, who grew up at Paul's Grove Landing. It's a waterfowl refuge, a honeybee sanctuary, and a bird sanctuary. Our thanks to Vic for doing that. Canoe, Kentucky? Well, is this even on? I'm sorry. We'll go. Next. Okay. See what we can do with this the next time. All right. Another chapter is that which is about county officials. This chapter discusses the early county assessors, attorneys, clerks, constables, coroners, deputy sheriffs, jailers, judges, justices of the peace, magistrates, school commissioners, and surveyors. And then we have a series on families. This chapter covers nearly 300 early families in the settlement of Franklin County. They're listed in alphabetical order. Your family may be in it, it may not. You just don't know until you get the book. All right, we'll continue with our pictures here. This is Canoe, Kentucky, and it was started by the late Ed Council and now owned by Nathan and Allison Deppenbrock. The Bedford Macklin place, beautiful home. This is just off the Georgetown Road. They don't want you to go down into that section. It's a beautiful place. It's really nice. Hugh Macklin settled on North Elkhorn Creek around 1790. And this was his son's home, Bedford Macklin. This is the original Poor Farm. It doesn't look that way today. It's a whole lot nicer. It's been all fixed up. The Poor Farm, we were lucky enough at the museum to get the ledger that listed the names of the people that lived at the Poor Farm, and it's very fascinating to have the opportunity to see. There was a whole lot more buildings than this. This is the grave of Jim Glasgow. Karen and I live across the street from Jim and Ellen Glasgow, who has the gallery, and he passed away back in 2022, I believe, and this is out on Newman Lane. And throughout the counties, you'll find these root cellars and rock cellars, shelters, because you know we do have occasionally a tornado that comes through. This is the Schweitzer Covered Bridge. The original bridge was built in the 1850s by George Hockensmith. It was destroyed in the 1997 flood when we got a lot of rain. It seemed like 19 inches or something, maybe more than that. This is a swinging bridge. This is the way some people avoided having to cross tolls or ferries by using the swinging bridge. And this is out on Stony Creek. The Peter W. Pfeiffer Fish Hatchery on Indian Gap Road was founded in 1912. And at the time of our writing, it is estimated to generate $47,043 in annual revenues. This was a very patriotic residence out on Hart Pike. Each one of those little fences where the blue is, later on down the road as you go, that extends to the left there considerably down Hart Pike, have little stories on them and poetry and very interesting things. This is the Big Eddy Beach. Hey, Charles and Estella Russell Wright developed Big Eddy Beach back in the early 1930s. Now, some of you may remember the Pop House and a dressing room facility, Queens for the women and Kings for the men. The 1974 tornado devastated that area. This was a beautiful home, and I'm not going to tell you where it is because it's a private residence, but it's out in the middle of nowhere in the county. You go down a nice little road, and then all of a sudden it becomes rocky and, gravelly, and then it goes up this hill, and that's what's at the end of it. Beautiful. This just shows you some of the beauty that we have in Franklin County. Now, I mentioned our communities, taking care of that. Now I'm going back to the families that we talked about. Over 300 families are represented in the book. As I said, the information on some of the families, I can't verify for sure, but it's what's been turned in. And some of the information's been turned in by young children, so I don't know if that's correct or not, but we will not, we'll give you the opportunity to judge for yourself on that. One section of the book deals with African Americans, black life in Franklin County. After the Civil War ended and slavery was no longer enslaved, they migrated to the cities and to the towns to seek employment and a life for their families. White people resented that blacks were taking their job opportunities. The Ku Klux Klan was rampant, not only in Franklin County, but Owen County and Shelby County. And this particular chapter on black life in Franklin County discusses lynchings and other atrocities within Franklin County. And a number of successful black farmers were in our town. In the Bridgeport area, there were a lot of farmers that had very great success. The Forks of Elkhorn at one time had the third largest community of blacks, and that's mainly because they were owned by the Macklin family in the Forks of Elkhorn area. We have a black timeline in this book as well. It's from 1800 to the 1960s. It contains population information, the owners of the enslaved, and histories of events. We have a section on churches. This is Bridgeport Christian Church on the Evergreen Road. It was organized in 1846. And this next one is the Evergreen Baptist Church. It came about in the 1830s out on Evergreen Road. And this was such a strange thing to find here close to town. The Watt, Kentucky Bodhisattvanaram. Thanks to Charlie Pearl, we know that Watt means temple. And there's their compound. This is right there at 641 Skyline Drive. This is Robert's Church. It's also Robert's School. Many of the early churches served as schools for a time in the county. This is the Antioch Church and Cemetery on Harveyland Road. It was organized in 1855. Out on the Lebanon Road is the Lebanon Baptist Church, started in 1825. And this is the Peaks Mill Christian Church, which this building was 1891, I believe. And then the North Fork Baptist Church out on Rocky Branch Road in Schweitzer, built in 1871. As you begin to read these chapters and experience the information that's available, you begin to see how people purchased land in the county because it was cheaper, and then they, for the most part, would get a trailer and live in that trailer maybe for 10, 25 years, and then they would build a house on it. And in each of those little 50 communities I talked about, a church, a school, one-room school, and that was because of transportation. You couldn't just hop in your car and drive down to Frankfort because there wasn't any cars. You had to do it on horseback or buggy, and it was very expensive and very time-taking. We have accounts that show where people would go from downtown Frankfort out to Jet, and it would take them all day long to do that with a wagon because you had to climb up that East Main Hill, you had to stop and water the horses, let them rest, and then continue on. Chapter on churches. We had a chapter on cemeteries as well. This is the Pleasant Ridge Baptist Church, and I want to salute Ramona Slattery. She's passed on and everything, but back in 1976, she and a committee of people went all over Franklin County and listed the cemeteries, did what they could, and wrote down what they could. A lot of cemeteries are just rocks today, don't even have names on them. But bless her heart, she saved genealogists a lot of time because in her book, you can see where it's located and all the names and everything in that book. This particular church is located about 3.5 miles from the old Bald Knob School. This is the Wiley Cemetery, located out on the Peaks Mill Road, about a quarter mile east of the junction of Peaks Mill and Indian Gap Roads. The fences they have around it primarily were put up to keep cattle from getting into the graveyards, because a lot of family cemeteries are out there where you bury your family, and in order to keep things straight and even, you would deal with it that way. See, this is the Bailey Cemetery on Bald Knob and Lebanon Ridge Road intersection. This is all Baileys for the most part in this particular cemetery. About 27 people are buried there. There's also a Bailey family graveyard in Bridgeport as well. Our next chapter would deal with schools. The schools, this is Bridgeport School. It started out as a one-room school in 1851, and it was on Evergreen Road on the site today where Bridgeport Christian Church is. The last high school class graduated in 1958 when the schools consolidated. This is Bald Knob School, built in 1939, served the community until 1958. It finished its career as an elementary school. Peaks Mill School was built by the Works Progress Administration and opened in 1939. The school remained a high school until consolidation and construction of Franklin County High School. The school closed in 2002. There's a chapter on post offices. There's a chapter on the chapter, it's just one page, but a list of the streams and the ferries and the waterways in Frankfort and Franklin County. This is the Thomas Paxton House, just across the southern county line off the Lawrenceburg Road on the Keaton Road. We found Thomas Paxton's home. He was born in 1761, died in 1844. This was in the Upper Benson Presbyterian Church. They met here, forerunner of Frankfort's first Presbyterian Church. Paxton settled here in 1783. The Arbor Fannin Memorial Bridge is located on the Indian Gap Road. Fannin taught history and geography at Franklin County High School for 27 years, served as 4th District Magistrate, and was on the Franklin County Fiscal Court. This is the John Major House, a stone house that was located out in Two Creeks. It's still there. Reverend William Hickman, who preached his first sermon in what would later become Forks of Elkhorn Baptist Church. Now that's where they preached the sermon. The church was located a distance from there. This is Weehawken, built by Stephen Fitzjames Trabue around 1860. The Trabue lot in the Frankfort Cemetery is the largest of any private owner. Weehawken is a Native American word meaning maize land, M-A-I-Z-E, corn land. This is a very, very wonderful photograph. It was torn down in 1947. This was the Mary Todd Lincoln summer home. Her family lived in Lexington, and they were able to have a farm over in Franklin County. Abraham Lincoln was here on several occasions, went right through the town of Frankfort on the train and went to visit with his wife's family. This particular building once stood at the 5th tee at Dockler's Lake Golf Course. Before becoming president, Lincoln was here on several occasions. This is Llangollen. I first read about Llangollen in Hermina Jet Darnell's Filling the Chinks, and I loved that name, Llangollen. It's Irish. It was built by Reverend John Taylor for his daughter, Sally, when she married Joseph Smith in 1822. The structure was later sold to author and educator John Lewis, who established his school here. Mary Todd Lincoln would run over and visit her friends at that school back in the day. Woodlake, this is off of the Georgetown Road. It no longer stands. This one burned down. It was named for a lake. They have 3 lakes out there at Woodlake on the property just off Georgetown Road, west of the Providence Baptist Church. Noted suffragette Madeline McDowell was born here. After a succession of various owners, the home was destroyed by fire. It once belonged to John C. Noel, and more recently, the Hockensmith family. This is Redstone Hall. Governor George Madison of Kentucky married Jane Smith, whose parents built this home. Madison fought in the War of 1812. He fought in the Native American Wars. He survived the horrors of the River Raisin. The house is believed to have been mentioned in Mary Jane Holmes' popular novel, since we're in a library, Marion Gray, the heiress of Redstone Hall. However, some sources are not in agreement with that story. Governor Madison went through all of those wars and battles and was wounded and everything. He got elected governor and then he died. She was our first governor to die in office. That's Camp Rest a While. Any of you ever been to Camp Rest a While? Aha, Nell Cox has been there. Camp Rest a While was a log house stone camp on Big Eddy Road, originally owned by E.H. Taylor Sr. and later by his adopted son, the whiskey distiller, Colonel E.H. Taylor Jr. Years later, it was purchased by Mrs. Boo of Rebecca Booth Chocolates. There's chapters, I said, on entities. I'm going to share some of the information that we'll find in the entities here, actually out of my copy of the book. What is an entity? Well, an entity is an entity. It's something special. We had a Cedar Hill Airport just off the Owenton Road, northern part of Franklin County. There's remnants of it. The museum has photographs of the Cedar Hill Airport. There is also the Silver Lake Airport. Before the Capital City Airport, small planes flew out of the old Silver Lake Airport off Georgetown Road between Frankfort and the Forks of Elkhorn. The state paid the airport about $250 a month rental fee to store 2 planes owned by the Commonwealth. This airport closed October 1st, 1951. This is another section showing you our quadrants. There's a chapter on landmarks, famous old houses of Frankfort, Franklin County. And we have bits of information about some and a lot of information about others. So there's a lot of information that's within these books, this particular book. The post offices are pretty wild, like I said. We had Franklin County Poor Farm, with big information on it. The Franklin County Homemakers, Franklin County Democratic Women's Club. These are entities. Franklin County Health Department, so the Regional Jail, Josephine Sculpture Park, the Sundown Inn. Oh my goodness. This is up toward Bald Knob. In the 1920s, it was a store and a gathering place for Bald Knob locals owned by a bachelor, William Vest. The inn provided square dancing on the weekends and hospitality and sounds of banjos and fiddles. Hallie Cook married her first husband, Charles Savello, an immigrant farmer from Italy, and they had 3 daughters. Later, Savello developed cancer and was dying, but he would not tell his wife about it. He kept it to himself. He kept it as a secret. When the unbearable pain became so bad, he took to drink. The drink began to release the rage he fought so hard to conceal, a rage of helplessness and shame that emasculated him as a provider for his family. A fierce argument occurred, and a brawl happened, ending with Savello being shot to death. It is a mystery to this day as to who killed Savello. The murder investigation determined that Hallie shot her husband in self-defense. But it might not have been that way. For years, there was speculation that it may have been one of the daughters that did the merciful shooting out of love for their father. As a widow, the 3 children, the Sundown Inn's owner, William Vest, he began supplying Hallie and her family, her daughters, with sustenance. Eventually, he married them, and they had 3 more children. The condensed research for this entry came from Frankfort's Richard Cabinet's article in the June 2016 Kentucky Explorer. You never know where you're going to find information about Frankfort, Franklin County. We're getting close to running out of time. I wanted to share some of the timeline for you, just to give you a picture of what I'm talking about. 1775. You ever been on Elkhorn Creek? That was in the year that it got its name. Elkhorn Creek was named by English traveler Nicholas Creswell in a journal entry on his trip to Kentucky, May 26. Worthless trivia, right? Yeah. Cherokee Native Americans sold all of a part of what would become Franklin County to the Transylvania Company. And later on, that was all null and void. They changed it. In 1776, Willis Lee, brother of Hancock Lee, was killed by the Indians. Lee's town was then abandoned for a time. This just goes on and on and on and gives you information. You may not have known this. We were part of Virginia in the beginning, this area. And Daniel Boone was appointed sheriff of Kentucky County, Virginia. A tobacco inspection warehouse was established by the Virginia Assembly at Leestown, although actual construction of the warehouse wouldn't begin until 1811. James Wilkinson came into the central Kentucky area in 1783. He started a store over in Lexington, Kentucky, and he quickly saw how the Kentucky River could take care of taking whiskey, flour, corn, tobacco down the river to the Ohio River, down the Ohio River to the Mississippi, and down the Mississippi to New Orleans, where they could get 5-10 times more than they could in this area here. All kinds of information. Aaron Burr, his first trial for treason was held in Frankfort, Kentucky. And he got off. Henry Clay. You thought I was going to say Mitch McConnell. It was Henry Clay. Henry Clay is the guy that got him off. Of course, later on, he came up with this scheme to get an army of 1,000 men, and he and James Wilkinson, who would be his vice president, would go and steal the Louisiana Purchase. They were going to take over, have a big time. Well, it didn't happen. They wound up going to court. Wilkinson turns on him and captures him. And then poor old Wilkinson, I'll tell you, his final days were very interesting. If I can find it here in front of me, I'll share it with you, how he went out. I don't see it. It's here. I'll guarantee you. It's in this book. But these kinds of things are very much appreciated by genealogists and people who are concerned about their history. Here's what I was going to read you about Wilkinson. Wilkinson, in 1810, was court-martialed and charged with treason, but acquitted. He was working for the Spanish. His name was Agent 13, and he never wanted anybody to call him Wilkinson at all. He didn't want to be known. He's just Agent 13. Over 20 years, he made quite a bit of money off of the Spanish. Well, Wilkinson would obtain a command in the War of 1812 to guard the border with Canada. Instead, he led his troops to embarrassing defeats along that frontier. He would be relieved of duty in April of 1814 and undergo another military trial, which failed to censure him. By the time it was over, he was infamous as the general who never won a battle or lost a court-martial. He's the founder of Frankfort. He's the guy that saw this as a good town. So we do appreciate our friend, Mr. Wilkinson. In the War of 1812, William Henry Harrison was up in Ohio in the northern part, and he wound up being surrounded by the British and the Native Americans, and he was running out of food. And so Kentucky sent about 846 soldiers. They marched all the way from central Kentucky, all the way up to near Toledo, Ohio. And the Native Americans, they circled around these Kentucky boys and captured them all and wound up putting them over at Fort Maumee in Indiana. And then they proceeded to make them run the gauntlet, or the British said, we don't care what you do with them, kill them. And they did. Out of the 846, oh my goodness, 170 escaped, 220 died, about 300 plus were captured at that time. One of those guys was Sam Hatter. He was my great-great-great-great-grandfather. He did run the gauntlet. But if he had gotten killed, I don't know what you all would be doing tonight, probably watching NCAA Lake. Anyway, there's also a section at the back of the book that's about publications, about books. People ask me, how did you know all this stuff? Well, I read a lot. And some of the books are available at the museum. During the time that I was there for 20 years, I went up to the Kentucky Library and Archives, and I would bring all of their books down and make copies of them. So I copied all of these extraneous and materials that you would never probably even known about. And they're all in the files at the museum. Over 20 of those books are written by Willard Rouse Gilson. He was the state geologist back in the 20s, 30s maybe. He came from Syracuse, New York, but he loved history. And he wrote a lot about Frankfort, Franklin County. There's about 89 books that I've listed in this book that you can find more information about Frankfort, Franklin County. I do want to share a few of them with you. I know that clock, somehow it's gotten up to almost 7. We want to give you a chance for some questions. I won't guarantee I'll know the answer. But Richard Taylor's here. His book on Elkhorn and his book on Buffalo Trace are excellent books. Great work, Richard. We can't thank you enough for what you've done for our community. If you're interested in Wilkinson, the best book is called An Artist in Treason. The best book on Frankfort, Franklin County is the Capitolina, Kentucky, 200-year history of Frankfort and Franklin County by Carl Kramer. We've embellished on all this information with the books that Frankfort Heritage Press put out. I found over in the Kentucky Historical Society 6 volumes of information that Bayless Hardin put together. He went through and made over 20,000 index cards of information from newspapers relating to Frankfort, Franklin County, and Kentucky history. I mean, it's just fantastic what's in them. They have them at the Historical Society, and we have them as well in the museum. Another prolific writer was Nettie Glenn. She wrote early Frankfort history, 1786 to the Civil War, and wrote all kinds of little tidbit articles that were quite interesting and very much appreciated. About the Civil War, our friend Jim Pritchard, he wrote The Embattled Capital, and it's all about Frankfort in the Civil War. We were the only northern capital to be taken over by the Confederates during the war. They were here for about a month. So many things that I think you'll find of interest. Frankfort City directories, we've got them all the way back to 1884, 85. They contain information of where people lived, where they worked, and some of their families as well. Okay, it's almost 7 o'clock. I didn't go down the rabbit hole, but I will give you the opportunity to ask a question if you have any. Diane's got a microphone that she'll give to you to add. Anybody got a question? Yes, sir.
Hold on just a second.
She's on the way. It's now 7 o'clock.
There you go.
Russ, it's good to be with you here tonight. I'm working on it.
That's Jim Pritchard who wrote the book on the Civil War.
Be whiskered this time. But I'm working on a true crime book that has strong ties to the Berry family of Berry Hill. And does the reference book contain any information on the family or the mansion?
I have read peripheral information about that story that you're talking about, but I don't have anything of any in-depth to add to it. But the city directories might be able to give you names of family members who you might be able to find still alive that might know more about it and get some firsthand reports.
Thanks.
Thanks for your book. It's a great book. Most information on the Civil War about Frankfort is a little tiny paragraph, but he's got 7 years it took to write that book. We have it at the museum as well. Anybody else? You're just dying to get out of here and get down to the NCAA ball game. Well, thank you all so much, and if you want to buy a book or something, we'll be back in the back. John?
Thanks. Thank you all so much for coming. Before you leave, I just want to remind you all that we have 3 upcoming lectures. April 12th is David Pollock, who is the director of the Kentucky Archaeological Survey. He's presenting on Frankfort's Forgotten Cemetery. Everybody remembers the Kentucky Transportation Cabinet. May 10th, Saturday, 1 o'clock, is the Lafayette Bicentennial. 200 years ago, this year, Marquis de Lafayette came to Frankfort. So we'll have a special lecture on that with Julian O'Shea from the Lafayette Trail and John Walker of Liberty Hall Historic Site. And then, of course, June 14th, we have also another 200th anniversary. The Beecham tragedy, the Sharp Beecham tragedy. If anybody remembers Colonel Sharp and Jeroboam Beecham, that happened 200 years ago in November. And our very own Richard Taylor will be giving a lecture on that. So thank you all for coming. Thank you, Russ. Appreciate you.